Welcome to the session. We'll start with some introductions, but the idea was for Appian and us at Persistent to talk about and discuss, some questions that we hear from our customers, right? I think we've been seeing for the last 2 days, the world of automation is changing big time. We wanted to give you some perspective on, what we think from both the companies, what we hear from our customers, and hopefully it'll resonate with you. Feel free to ask questions. I think the app has a facility for you to type in some questions, or we can always go the old-fashioned way and you can raise your hand and we can give you a mic. Yeah, make sense? All right. Thank you. So this is the two of us. We can start with some introductions. Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Tom Perrone. I joined Appian about 9 months ago. My role as an industry lead is to help enable both our customers and partners on use cases and how Appian can help automate things in the financial services industry. I spent the last 20 years actually in operations on Wall Street. I worked for Citi Private Bank for the last 14 and a half years. And prior to that, I was with Neuberger Berman and Lehman Brothers. So my career has seen an operations track record of all touch points from a client perspective, a lot of capital markets exposure, as well as exposure for the process to getting information from our operational platforms, for lack of better terms, over to regulators. So when we're meeting with our customers, I have the opportunity to reimagine and think about what the process looks like today versus what it's going to look like tomorrow. And now, what are we thinking where AgenticAI can come in, and how could that help operationalize and make things a little bit better?
And this is some fantastic experience because we wanted to hear from Tom on his experience at Citibank, also from a business user perspective. So thank you for joining us.
Sure.
My experience, I lead the intelligent automation sales team at Persistent, and we'll give you a plug on who is Persistent, 2 minutes. But I've been in the automation industry for 15 years. I worked in companies like Automation Anywhere, Workato, Software AG, Webmethods. Started my career as a Java developer, but I was really bad at that, so I got into sales. I've been doing this for 15 years, so I've seen some trends and patterns. These days, maybe people who are young wouldn't hear terms like microservices, services. It's still relevant. Then they became APIs, and now we're talking about agentic and stuff like that. So it's been really fun to watch, and it's still changing, right? So we would try and discuss a few points here. I'll take only 2 minutes. Persistent is a $1.4 billion company. We are really growing super fast. We just announced our results. We had like 20 consecutive quarters of growth, so pretty big. We are a part of, and I have some colleagues here, part of the intelligent automation practice, doing a lot of work on the AI side. Do visit our booth. There are some solutions that we built using AI and on top of Appian. I think those are very, very interesting. We're a global company, a huge presence. Of course, Appian is actually our biggest partner, so we do a lot of good work together. Yes, we keep winning awards. In fact, last year we had 3 winners, 3 of our customers. We were the Appian Innovation Award winner also, but we'll move forward. I'll skip a few slides, but this is how we go to market with our customers. And I think you will see some glimpses of what Gartner has been talking about, what our customers have been talking about. I think this kind of encapsulates very neatly on what is automation, right? It is not one technology. I mean, that's the good and bad news. There's no one platform which, can do everything. There are buckets in terms of discovering the processes, digitizing them using OCR IDP. Appian has a good platform there. Orchestrating, I think we've been hearing this for so many months now, right? I'm sure you guys would have heard of the Gartner board in some of the sessions, the business orchestration and automation technologies. I think everybody's starting to use that, but that's becoming more and more important. And we'll talk about that. I think I'll ask Tom these questions, but it's all about orchestrating bots and humans and technologies and agents. I think this is what the automation will come down to. That's why it's a very important piece of what we do. And of course, the typical automation with agentic and Gen AI and the typical AI ML pieces in the framework, right? We'll stop here and we'll take a pause, and I'm sure, hopefully you can relate to a few things. But maybe, Tom, I can ask you in your words. I'll maybe stop talking for a few minutes. But, we've seen this, right? I mean, typically processes start manually, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure everybody has Microsoft Excel, right, in some shape or form. And then along came RPA. I think when I was there at Automation Anywhere, 2018 to 2021 was like peak, right? And we see intelligent automation, combination of these technologies. And I think Gen AI was very short-lived. I've not seen people, they've stopped talking about Gen AI. Everybody's talking agentic now. I wanted to get your experience in terms of, how do you see this? Do you relate to this from an Appian standpoint, also from a Citibank standpoint on
Sure.
how you got into it? And where are we now?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So a couple of things come to mind when we think about automation, productivity, efficiency. One of the easiest things that we think we can do is open an account for a customer in financial services. It's actually one of the most complicated things that we have to do based on all of the regulations and rules that are in place, depending on what type of account you're opening. About 15 years ago, I was opening accounts. I was running an account opening organization for Citibank, and the first question I asked one of the analysts was, where do you get the application? This was 2010. Where do you get the application that you want to open the account for? These are investment accounts. They're pretty straightforward brokerage accounts. There's nothing really crazy. And the team was literally just keep punching in information. And their response to me was, oh, it comes in the envelope. I said, oh, so we get physical hard copies. This is 2010. I said, how are you assigning the account numbers? They said, well, we have a book. And we printed out the Excel spreadsheet so everybody could see the same page. And we passed the book around for maker and checker. I said, wow, okay. So we automated that to the best that we could. And at the time, right, this is spreadsheets and emails, right? And we built these processes and we said, okay, every time an application comes in, it's going to be digitized now. We weren't even getting PDFs at that point. And so, fast forward to 2025, right? That organization is still key punching accounts to open them up. Now, they're opening them up in a different fashion. They're opening them up in a different system that's feeding into the end product processor. But at the end of the day, it's still not straight through. Yeah. And it still has human intervention, and it still has human room for error. And when I think about the evolution and where we are in the process of the evolution, something as simple as opening an account would fall in every single one of these buckets as having an opportunity to be improved, right? And when we go back to 2010, it was spreadsheets and emails because that's what we had. Yeah. But the point that I want to make is that when you get to steps 3 to 5, actually executing on that in a large corporation or a large financial institution, especially in the United States, becomes tremendously difficult. And when you're a business user and you're talking to your technologists and you're telling them your business problem, they will say things like, we can help you build an application to do that. But they don't tell you, or they don't tell me, by practice, we have options. And those options are different platform development platforms. Appian is one of them. Yeah. So knowing about Appian from a business perspective is really important for me in my role to make sure that we're communicating that. Because the opportunity to do this intelligently and hyper-automate with the business user understanding the capabilities of the product is key. Because we could say RPA or we could say agentic AI, but at the end of the day, the business user just wants the account to get opened properly. And so over the years, where I see us today in being able to enable and articulate clearly from a partnership perspective to customers, not just why now, but how to get that account open the right way in a fashion that if something changes tomorrow, because we know that the administration changes things all the time, and then you have to pivot, you can with Appian. And you haven't codified something that's going to break downstream elsewhere.
So is it safe to say that the processes don't change, of course, the way we run them, the way we automate them, the way we bring technologies together. I mean, the motivations are the same, right?
Yes.
Like you see on the slide, more productivity, lower cost, more efficiency, do more with less, right? I mean, those motivations remain the same.
They remain the same.
Okay. So we also have a point of view. Tom and I were discussing before this. We thought we'll project an example, right? And we were thinking that automation is not changing; it's evolving, right? So this is a simple customer onboarding example, right? And hopefully it resonates, right? Imagine like the process was always there. It was running manually, correct? Somebody applies, we need to onboard them. It was maybe a written piece of paper. Then along came RPA, right? So out of the 7 steps that you see in the process, maybe 3 or 4 got automated, right? Good, right? So 4 out of 7, okay, we got some percentage of automation, right? Then maybe with IDP, we maybe automated 1 more step in the process, right? But now with agentic, do we have an opportunity to take the extent of automation or the percentage of automation to the next level? Is that why we're calling it like more evolution and not changing, right? Because I think the bots or the RPA, IDPs of the world and workflow automations, I think they will all work together, right? It's not really replacing 1:1. Is that a correct understanding?
In my opinion, absolutely. Yeah. But I think that, and what's interesting, for what it's worth, right, we both came to the table with the same example and the same diagrams, but just different formats, because this is so prolific in financial services. So I'm going to back up 1 second. From a customer onboarding perspective, I think of any type of onboarding and any type of product that you have, right? In some of our sessions yesterday, I was talking with some of our customers about when they onboard a portfolio manager into their fund company structure, right? That's one of their onboarding use cases that's challenging, because once that portfolio manager gets on their platform, the terms of the deal that they've signed with the company drive their compensation. So when you're looking at these boxes across a page, these drive other things. And so when you're onboarding a customer, be it for an investment account or an employee because they're going to be, a new industry lead, right? There's a means. It's a means to an end of a process, right? So that being said, what I think is important, and what I love the way is articulated in this image, is that in the middle, which I will argue is the current state at most places, right, you still see that there's a human sitting on top of everything, right? There's that human who's overseeing everything and is playing the role of gatekeeper to ensure that the automation is working. And if that's not the case, chances are the control environment of the organization has put that human at the end as a checker or someplace else to make sure that the technology is doing the work that it's supposed to do. So you're getting some efficiencies, but you're not getting them all.
Right.
The bottom future state, I think, is really interesting. Because when we think about agentic AI and we think about the nodes within the process, where you have the human is where the human is needed from an exception perspective. So if everything follows the happy trail, there's no reason for a human to look at it. And if you can audit all of that and you have the ability to see what was done at each step and where it was done, there's no need for a human to look at it as long as the rules were followed. And you could look at data to look for your exceptions to make sure your controls are efficient. But where there's an exception, and in the places that are shown on this chart, specifically at a risk assessment, or specifically at completing and articulating to the customer that their onboarding has been completed, that's where the human intervention comes into play.
So humans are not going away?
Never. Well, I should say never, but...
Good news, yeah.
That's the good news.
I wanted to check or ask you from your experience, and I'll be honest, right? I don't know everything.
Me neither.
We talk to a lot of customers. Everybody's confused. They have multiple products. Every customer or every product vendor has their own agentic platform, right? And they talk to us and we talk to them. Like, we have discussions like, hey, how many bots can you move to agents, right? Or where do I start?
Yep.
right? Where do I begin my agentic journey or AI journey, right? So the question is, what problem statements do you hear from your customers, right? What are the challenges, both from an enterprise level, also from a business user level? If you can throw some light,
Yep.
I think that'll be amazing.
So I think the business users are illustrative of the enterprise issues, right? And so when we think of any type of an institution, from a procedural standpoint, it's typically the silos that cause the swivel chair, right? And the silos may have been built for purpose, right? It could be that they were built for regulatory purposes because you have two different regions operating on the same platform. It could be because you have two different legal entities operating on the same platform, whatever it may be. But there is cross-silo orchestration required. And that is a requirement for data, or it's a data requirement, right? And so when we think about at the enterprise level, everybody's talking about data and how we're going to normalize the data and make sure we're using the right data. And what's our data management strategy? One of the things that really turned my eyes towards Appian last summer when I was looking to make a career change was data fabric. In financial services, the concept of being able to touch custody platforms without having to take the data out of the platform, put it in a pool, or put it in some sort of a data store, reconcile it, address it, and put it back to the official source is the mantra that I was always taught. It was, you need an operational data store, you need a Snowflake, you need some sort of a data lake, because that's where your golden source data is going to live. But when we think about Appian and the opportunity to take data fabric and put it on top of your core operating platforms and use the data you need when you need it and put it back into that core operating platform, to me, that was a game changer as a COO, right? That's a game changer. Because from an implementation perspective, when I was thinking about projects I could do with it, I was thinking, well, I never have to worry about regression testing on my client statements. I never have to worry about regression testing on any of my regulatory reports. My trading systems that are kicking out, reports for MiFID reporting in London from the US, they're fine, because that's not part of this process. And so when you're taking only the data that needs to be addressed for whatever particular process it is, working with it and putting it back, that's a novel concept. And in a financial services institution, the opportunity to do that and to orchestrate a process, regardless if it's onboarding, corporate action processing, loan origination, we could take any process that requires multiple different people looking at something and multiple different swivel chair systems and say that we can do that from one single screen and not touch the core data. That is powerful.
So what do you think about, let's say, AgenticAI or Gen AI? Is it real? Do you see examples? Are your customers implementing it?
Yes.
Where are they, right? Like I said, we're having a lot of discussions with our customers, like a lot of pilots, a lot of POCs, and now we're talking about some real projects. So I just want to go a little deeper and maybe ask you a question. Is agentic real? Is it here to stay? What should we expect to see in the next 1 to 2 years? How will, again, going back to your user experience question, do you think there'll be a difference in experience? See, because when we talk to our customers, we also talk about customer experience and employee experience, right? Which is important, right? It's not just about external, but also internal employees or business users have to work with the technologies. So throw some light on, is it real? Is it here to stay? Like, what do you think is the future in the next 1 or 2 years?
It's a loaded question, my friend. Do I think it's here to stay? Look, I think it's a natural iteration of large language models, and it's putting the large LLMs to work where they need to be put to work, right? And it's a concept of, enabling the technology to make the decision for us based on the information that it has, right? That being said, the actual practical use cases for it and getting them adopted and having firms actually use them, that's where the art of the possible becomes the challenge, right? And so when we think about agentic, and when I think about it from a procedural perspective, to me, the first things I think of is, what are we doing with RPA today, right? And is RPA appropriate for it?
Is it dead?
No.
Okay.
But is it appropriate for it, right? Should we be thinking about, are we scraping a document for a name and address to put into a platform, right? Whereas would agentic AI make more sense to start thinking about, we're gonna use IDP to bring that document in, compare it to another document to see if it's changed. I mean, things like version control of a document effectively can go away, right? If you deploy the AI the right way, and you have a document that you gave to a customer for them to open or to act on, and you're afraid if that customer changed that document because you sent them a Word file instead of a PDF, well, part of the process immediately could be compared to what you sent out. It's out-of-the-box functionality. I mean, these are not novel, but they are powerful, and it just takes a step away from the human. So short answer is, I think that each process and each operational professional needs to take a step back and think of their process as it stands today, think of what the humans are doing today, and think of how much of that information is the same thing over and over and over again that can be repeated by a system or a tool, and you can link those together like a chain, and that's where you start to come up with your agents, right? So I think it's pragmatically deployed. I think the approach of deploying it within a process at the particular place where it needs to be within the process keeps financial services institutions comfortable with the words AI in the process, right? And comfortable with using AI because you're not worried about your data being put in ChatGPT's cloud.
So that begs another question. Let's say a common customer we have, right? They're starting on the automation journey today, right? Can they just leapfrog straight into using agentic right away? Or is there a progression they need to follow? I'll tell you, at least in my experience, we used to start with building like a center of excellence.
Yeah.
It used to be called an RPA COE. That's how the term started. Then it became intelligent automation, hyperautomation. There are different terms. Now it's agentic automation. The COEs have changed the names, right? Do we still need to go like step by step in an incremental way, start with one technology, or like in your experience, what do you think?
I think it
depends.
I think it honestly depends on the problem we're solving, right? If there is something that's innocuous that we believe can be automated, and it's, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say you want to cut a wire to a customer, right? And you want to send them, their bank instructions haven't changed, everything is the same, but at the end of the day, you're releasing a new platform from your bank, right? You have a new platform that's going to be, it's a new cutting edge platform and it's there, right? But everything else is being done in the old platform. And this is part of what we talk about from a journey perspective at Appian, right? Is we could create the new experience today, right? We could create that new experience, that new user experience, the operational process on the old system and effectively make it look new. And as we're running in parallel to the new system, because let's just say somebody's key punching into the new system to make sure it's working and we're getting comfortable with it, we have the AI agent in the background, right? And I think there was a graphic shown yesterday during the keynote, which was really cool, where they just flipped the AI agent with the human process, right? And so if you think about a real use case being, we've got a new system coming, we have an old system, we're gonna fix the process today, the old backbone's gonna stay there, and then when we change it over to the new backbone, there's still no change to the user. So at the end of the day, the customer experience isn't impacted, your employee experience isn't impacted, and you did it in a controlled fashion. So to answer your question, to jump directly to agentic, in certain cases, sure.
Yeah, because the technology is available, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But to get comfortable with it as an operations person or as a risk person, in a highly regulated industry, that's where the challenge becomes.
Makes sense. So I obviously have a lot of questions. I'm also checking the time. So let's also talk about some maturity levels, right? Just similar topic, right?
Sure.
We see customers, obviously, they've started on the journey. They're using only RPA, for example, right? Again, Appian has everything. We can start with an Appian RPA. But what would you tell a new customer who's just using one technology? Because we see a mix of technologies, right?
Sure.
Large enterprises, I use this phrase, 3 of everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely, especially for global.
So there's no plethora. I mean, there's a plethora of technologies, but does that come first, or does the business process come first? What is more important? Because I attended the keynotes and everything, right? You talk about the agility layer. There's a layer on the top. There's data fabric, right? What is more important?
Where do you start, right? That's the. Yeah. So for me, when I'm talking to customers, it comes down to, I'm going to go back to what you had articulated earlier about Gartner and BOAT, right? So when I'm talking to customers, we've seen thematic problems in financial services, right? Payments, KYC, AML.
Yeah.
Right? Those are 2 of the biggest conversations that we have. Payments is largely driven by an industry shift for Swift, right? But also on the periphery is digital assets, right? So you have 2 trains that are going to collide at some point: traditional banking and finance, and digital, right? You've got firms that are deploying all these different technologies. You've got to figure out how to orchestrate it. So when we're talking to customers, the first thing I'm trying to understand is, what is your product's intention? What is the product that the client is using your bank for, or what is the intention of that product? Is it an investment product? Is it a savings and loans product? What is the product's purpose, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a human who is asking for something and a service that you're providing to them. So what we're providing to them, we need to make sure we're meeting their standards. So the process has to get you there. But if we open a checking account every time a guy wanted an investment account, he would never do business with our bank again. So from the very beginning, it's, okay, well, what systems are we using? Do we have a checking system? Sure. Do we have an investment system? Sure. Is it sufficient for what we're looking to accomplish? What's missing in that system? Do we have the data elsewhere? Are we comfortable with where the data is, right? And that's where building out the process, and that's where when we sit down with our solutions consultants and working with yourselves and others, right, to map out the processes to see where does it make sense to start thinking about not only introducing Appian, but re-engineering that process. But to me, it's very important to understand fundamentally what the customer is buying, and in many cases, why. Because then we know what we have to be selling them and giving to them, so we know what's in that product.
Makes sense. One more related question, right? What do you think the customers are facing challenges? I alluded to a few of those. It's confusing, where to start, how to start. Is there anything else that you want to add, like when you talk to customers and they talk about agentic? See, sometimes it's a directive which comes from the top. Hey, we have the budget, everybody's doing agentic, we want to do agentic. That is one way of going about things, right? But then what are the challenges that the customers face when adopting?
In financial services specifically, it's cloud, right? It's on-prem deployment versus cloud. Okay. That is, I would say, the number one biggest challenge when you're working with a large tier 1 bank, tier 2 bank, where they are highly regulated. They're very, very concerned about data privacy. They're very concerned about data leaving their 4 walls. They're concerned about the impact of PII, reputational risk. That becomes a real challenge, right? Because if we're not able to deploy the process through the cloud, which can leverage data fabric, which can leverage the AI, which can leverage all of the greatest things that we have to offer, then we are on our heels trying to figure out how to fit a round peg into a square hole with old technology.
Makes sense. So again, I'll touch upon the topic, which is the future of work, right? And that's my last question. I'll maybe, do we have questions coming in? Okay, cool. So we can leave some time for that. So somebody actually asked me a controversial question also. I think we touched upon that. Will there be job losses? Do we lose people in the process, or will the role of people change? You know, like when RPA came, right, it was supposed to change so many industries, right? Nothing happened. I think we all adopted RPA pretty well.
Because the graphic still has the human.
Correct, right? So human in the loop is still there, but it's not like it's replaced. Maybe it's changed the profile of people. It upscaled, people moved on to do better things, right? Anything similar that comes to mind using agentic? Because people do ask us questions, right?
So what I think is interesting, right? I can date myself, right? So I could talk about opening an account manually, right? But in my career, we've always traded electronically. I didn't have to go down to a specialist on Wall Street and book a pink slip and go through a clearinghouse to get my security and actually cash a physical check to pay for that security and get a certificate in stock, right? So if you think about what it was like to buy IBM, 10 shares of IBM in 1980 with the cash you have in your account, and how that is done today operationally without humans looking at 90% of it, right? We've already passed a lot of those steps, right? But what I think is interesting is that when you look at people graduating and employees coming into the workplace today, they're coming in and there's a lot of automation already, right? And so when we think about will jobs be lost, I think jobs are different. I think they've changed, right? You don't have a trading floor specialist anymore. You don't have a clearing agent.
Actually, a lot of job profiles have vanished.
Correct. But there are new jobs, right? There are different jobs today to enable the workflows that we have today. And you argue that the workforce is or needs to be trained to focus on how to operate in today's environment. So my personal opinion of it is there's an inflection point. There will be changes, right? But I think it's no different than some of the conversations we at Appian have with our customers, where we say to them, what's your, like, a customer will come to us and say, we have a mainframe system that we cannot unplug, and I have no developers to work on that. Like, the developers literally are dying off. And it's like, it's a morbid concept, but there's nobody to build the code to support these systems. And we talk to them about a path to the future and unplugging things slowly, right? Like we talked about in that other example, because that's just, the industry just changes and people change. So will there be changes? Absolutely. Will there be jobs lost? Probably. But will there be job changes and more jobs and different jobs?
Newer jobs.
Newer jobs, different jobs, different types of jobs.
Yeah, no, we were talking to a CHRO, one of the customers, and they were talking about like a simple HR auditor.
Sure.
That role has vanished.
Yeah.
Somebody will just do random audits, but now with agents and bots and stuff like that, they can say, we can audit each and every record, for example, right?
You used to have, I mean, if you think about it, back in the day, we used to have, you know, when we were doing our operational testing, we'd say we test 80% of the population, or we test 60% of the population. Now it's 100% tested and the exceptions are reviewed, right? And if there's more than a certain number of exceptions, then we know there's a problem with the process. It's just matching. So similar.
We'll take the questions, but anybody, I'm not sure if it resonates. Are you experiencing similar things? If you want to comment, stand up, say something, absolutely feel free. We'll take the questions that are in the app. But any other questions, guys, please.
How do you ensure reliability, transparency, and governance when agents are making autonomous decisions that impact customers or business operations?
Want me to take it?
Yeah. It's an operations question.
Yeah, I know. So I think how is doing it iteratively. The short answer is to do it iteratively, and that's, as we were talking earlier, right, is that flip. Is that comfort level flip of what are we asking the AI agent to do? And I personally believe that as a former operations manager, it's going to be slow, it's going to be iterative, and it's going to be mundane, boring tasks,
Yeah.
but crumbs make cake, right? So over time, as an operations leader and as an operations department is getting comfortable with these processes being performed without human supervision because they are repeatable, they are known, the data is there, we're comfortable with it, that's when it starts to ramp up, right? So I think it's developing your governance while you're deploying it. And what that looks like to me, right, is I think of when I used to open an account that was a discretionary traded account by a portfolio manager. As the portfolio manager, I had to open the account separately from my custodian who was opening the account, and they were the official books and records. So what I would see is a representation of what they have on their records, and I'm trading off of that, right? And I have rules I have to follow. And those rules are set forth in my product, and they're set forth in the application. And I have to report those rules to a committee. So in my old business, every single portfolio was reviewed on a quarterly basis to ensure that it was consistently invested to the guidelines that were provided, right, wrong, or indifferent. And what would happen is, the way I envision this, right, is as you're transitioning your pieces of your process into these agentic pieces, where is that data? So I'll give you an example. If an agent is taking a restriction from an application and putting on an account that says, do not buy Appian stock, fairly straightforward, right? So how do we check that that works? Well, my fiduciary review committee checks all of the Appian accounts that have it associated with it and make sure that there were no transactions executed in the Appian ticker. And that's reviewed every quarter, right? It's a manual check because someone goes in and takes all of the accounts, all of the transactions, and all of the restrictions and aligns them. Well, if we could just think about from a governance process and agentic process to that, it could be really simple of once you're opening that account, once you're adding that restriction, okay, now from a governance perspective, the bot can go over here or the agent can go over here and say, next time we have a fiduciary review, here's a new account to add to that review, and you start to automate that part of it as well.
But I think I'll agree to that because security and governance is very important. In fact, we have built a lot of frameworks on top of Appian to monitor the bots, what they're doing, right? There are a lot of best practices in our COE frameworks that we talk about. Like one of them is the agent should be very specific to what they're doing. It's better to build 3 agents doing one job each than one agent doing 10 jobs. That's when it starts getting messy, right? So yeah, a lot of these things are available with us just to monitor the agents and the bots and what they're doing.
But that audit trail is what's there, right?
Yes.
So you could see what steps it took. So if the application came in and Appian was missing a P for the ticker, right? Yeah. There's a control point there somewhere, right? Why was that P missed and why were we restricted on APN instead of APPN or whatever? Yeah. But you get the point.
There's more questions.
Yeah, this is a good segue. Is there an industry standard framework or set of best practices for implementing agentic AI across regulated sectors like finance, healthcare, or federal government?
At least from our standpoint, it's still a lot of work in progress. I mean, the guidelines are being developed, new use cases are coming. A lot of things are in flux. Like, we're also learning, guys. I mean, in all transparency, right? This is new for everybody, right? Like you mentioned, right? Some things don't work in the cloud. The customers still want something on-prem, right? Yep. There are new guardrails, like you mentioned, in Appian being developed, right? So, yes, there's still job being done and things being developed. I'm not sure if you want to add something.
I just think the best practice from an implementation standpoint for the end user is that when they're thinking about automating any type of a process, to ensure that whatever their governance model today, they don't have to explain to somebody why they took something out of it.
Yeah.
Right? If you're telling a regulator in any highly regulated industry that you went from a manual check on 100% of something to an agent doing it, and you just have full confidence in that agent being able to do it, but you can't back that up, I don't think that that's going to fly. Right? But if you're able to say the agent does it, this is how the agent does it, this is the data that supports it, this is how we're monitoring that agent, it's no different than a human.
And that also ensures the accuracy of what the agent is doing, right?
Correct.
I think a lot of customers had concerns in terms of, can I trust what the agent is doing, right?
Correct.
And that also improves the accuracy. I mean, we had customers where 99.5% accuracy does not work. Like these are customers who are processing payroll for their employees. Even 99.9% does not work. They cannot send the wrong paycheck to 0.1% of the employees, for example, right?
Yep.
So that's why all these things become really important, right? Okay. Any more questions?
We've got another in here. How do you get buy-in from cyber governance, legal, risk, and compliance to enable agentic AI capabilities?
I'm laughing because I'm still trying to figure that out. I think, so look, the reality of it is I could selfishly say that I never had to do that because I left industry before it became a reality. But my friends and former colleagues, everybody's learning at the same time, right? I think it's a matter of every company is going to have their own governance model. I mean, I was with different customers today, 2 different tier 1 banks today who are on 2 completely different paths and in 2 completely different places. And it's just because their governance models are different, right? Somebody's a lot more conservative than somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, we can articulate what the system can do. The lawyers.
But I will say that things will change, guys. I mean, the legal departments will get involved, the contracts will change, the safeguards will change. We had a customer, large company which makes GPUs. You don't have to guess. They implemented an AI solution, right? It was an enterprise search use case. And what the AI agent, it was not agent, it was called something else before. What it started doing was, so they opened up the entire SharePoint for the AI, and there were a lot of restricted, confidential documents it started reading and absorbing, and and it started spitting out those things. So again, it comes back to data, comes back to security, comes back to guardrails. So they had to really go each document and mark it confidential, and then train the models that do not read all these things. So it was like, it pushed them back by 6 months. But again, a lot of data security, data governance, rules, and what guardrails you assign around the agents and how you train them. Again, that becomes very important. But I know it'll be a little messy with the legal departments, but I think we'll have to do with it.
I think we'll get through it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions, comments? Good. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks for having me.